Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to this edition of Leaders on the Frontier Live. It is the 25th of September, 2025, the year of our Lord, and a warm welcome to everyone. We're so glad that you could join us today for a very important discussion about debanking, the use of, well, legislation, the state to basically keep you away from your money. And what are the impacts of that? Uh, we have an extraordinary panel of guests that are going to be joining us to talk about that important issue. And I think you should really pay attention to this one. I think it has real impacts, and I think it's far more common than perhaps we realize. So we need to talk about banking today, and just amazing. And frankly, it gives me a lot of hope for our country because you care. And we try to serve our audience by talking about relevant policy issues. Our mission at Frontier is to educate. So please check out our website, and we've got lots to offer. It's interesting the comments that are coming in. Kelly says, "What frightens me is all the people blind to what is going on." So well said. So speaking of comments, I wanted to share a few with you. It says, "I pray for you every day. Thank God for you and your crew. So nice to get the truth. I never listen to those fake ones." Wow. And that's from Maggie Cummings, 8554. Fabulously thoughtful and well informed guest, David. What a pleasure to listen to respectful, articulate men. Guests have a stimulating and open conversation. Thank you, Caitlin. So thank you very much, Kate Lane, for that comment. That makes our day as we get that kind of feedback, and we really do appreciate it. So it's an amazing audience. Um, we've got a lot of people coming on board here. And Sheridan, thank you so much. One of our regulars who says, "Hit the like button, folks, for more great content and moments to show your support." Well done. And I don't know if you know this, but Frontier is supported by donations. So please donate to Frontier. It helps support us and provide these kinds of programs. We don't take any government funding because we think our independence is important. So there you go. So there's very important comments. And as people come on to this broadcast, I want to share with you a few highlights of interesting headlines in the news. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the heartfelt story around ostriches. There's 400 of them facing certain death at a universal ostrich farm. It's called in northern BC. On midday on Wednesday, they received a stay of that order because the Supreme Court of Canada is going to hear this. It's a very difficult situation as people are very concerned about the bird flu and the impacts and the debate is, well, is this appropriate to take out this incredible herd of ostriches as well as the millions of birds that have already died? It's a devastating disease that travels around the world. It's a bit of a mystery, but this is the context. So stay tuned on that one. I also wanted to talk about a very interesting bill that's emerging, Bill C9, and it was announced by the minister here, Sean Fraser, and it has to do with hate speech. So maybe we could share that clip.
In addition to the campaign commitments around the crimes of obstruction or intimidation, we are moving forward with establishing a new crime of hate. This will operate by layering on top of existing criminal offenses with a new offense that will specifically target hate where that crime was committed because of their motivation of hatred towards the victim. You can imagine that it may be more morally culpable for a person who assaults another, not just because of a personal problem they may have, but because of their belonging to a community. If a person robs a store because the owner comes from a particular group, or if a person commits harassment against someone who is seeking to attend university classes merely because they belong to a particular community of faith or race. This behavior is not just morally culpable. The impact has reverberations through the entirety of a community, and I would argue tears at the seams of the social fabric of the nation.
So there you go. There's an announcement regarding that Bill C9. So let's stay tuned on what that is. We're going to certainly be coming back to you in the near future about it. Does it make sense? Is this legislation being designed to serve you or frankly undermine your freedoms. There is responses already from Premier Doug Ford. He had this to say.
Actually go forward and start focus on bail reform. Why doesn't he start focus on mandatory sentencing? Why doesn't he focus on Young Offenders Act? There's not one person I've talked to that has said, we want to give the judges, more politically appointed judges, more authority. I haven't heard one person, but he's so bent on going up there. He messed up the immigration. He's messed up housing. Now they put him in as Attorney General. He needs to focus on what counts for the people. Come up to York and ask anyone in York, should we give our federal judges more power, or should we focus on crime? Should we focus on bail reform? Should we focus on Young Offenders Act, that these young kids, 14 years old, right here in York, are running around with guns? I guarantee you won't have one person say, let's give judges more power and reduce the democracy that people elect people to make decisions.
So there you go. Those are some, I think, important questions being tabled here. So let's keep an eye on Bill C9 as that comes forward. I also wanted to highlight that the remarks by the Governor of the Bank of Canada, Tiff Macklem, said economic reform is very much needed in this country to deal with our productivity problem. I think that's a very interesting story, as this continues to be a major problem for Canada, is a kind of a flat economy for the last decade. And then also that relates to productivity problems. And speaking of productivity, you may have noticed that just within the last hour and a half, there was breaking news that Canada Post has been directed by Ottawa to end all remaining household door-to-door delivery. If memory serves me correctly, about 3/4 of mail is delivered through mailboxes, and the last quarter remains door-to-door. And so that will save approximately, according to the announcement, about $400 million. I think Canada Post is basically an insolvent organization, and they've been, I think, in 20 months of protracted labor talks. So this is a big deal. It begs the question, quite frankly, are there other options for Canada Post? As we've highlighted in this program many times, perhaps it should be privatized like so many other nations. We also found some interesting stats, and that had to do with the fact that Canada is flatlined in terms of population growth right now. We have some very interesting numbers there in terms of different areas of the country, as well as Canada's total fertility rate reached a new low of 1.25 births per thousand. And obviously, the replacement rate needs to be 2.1. Now we're at 1.25. So that is really quite an ultra low fertility group of nations. Switzerland is at 1.29, Luxembourg at 1.25, and Singapore at 0.97, and South Korea at 0.75. This means a rapidly aging population and depopulation of those countries. So this is quite interesting. Sheridan says, what Canadians need to understand is as prosperity declines in Canada, so does freedom and liberty. Canada has made productivity and competition a sin. Canada is fighting against itself. So well said. So how do we actually make this the most prosperous nation in the world? So I also want to highlight that our Prime Minister is optimistic about expanding ties with China in terms of trade. I think he met with the Premier of China, Li Jiang, on Tuesday meetings in New York City, and there he is with the Premier. And so the opportunities include energy, agriculture, and so many other things. So that's a very interesting direction. And finally, I wanted to highlight a very interesting thing that I was not aware of when it comes to statistics, when it comes to unemployment. And this is reported by the Blacklock's reporter today. Statistics Canada confirms that it excludes jobless data from First Nation reserves in calculating its benchmark labor force survey through Indigenous communities, even though they have one of the highest jobless rates in the country. 500,000 Canadians live on reserves nationwide, and nearly as many as that live in Newfoundland and Labrador, and more than twice the number in Prince Edward Island. And the question is, why does the labor force survey exclude such persons? I find that unbelievable. But I think that would be wise to include all Canadians, including Indigenous Canadians. So there you have it. Those are some of the highlights. So I am very looking forward to our discussion with an esteemed panel, and I want to introduce them. I want to introduce Brett Oland, who's the CEO of Bull Valley Credit Union. A warm welcome to you, Brett.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And of course, Marco Navarro-Genie is the Vice President of Research and Policy at Frontier. And a warm welcome back, one of our regulars, Marco.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
And of course, Lee Harding. He is a Senior Research Associate at Frontier, and he's an all-around great guy. So welcome, Lee.
Thanks. I'll take that, David. Glad to be here.
Well, my question today is, have you been debanked, and why is debanking important? We know that there's been a lot of challenges with this country. When we saw the imposition of the Emergencies Measures Act years ago in this country, in response to the truckers' convoy, we saw an awful lot of people impacted, and it was really quite disturbing. A wake-up call to many Canadians that we can't take our freedom for granted. This had enormous impacts on thousands of people. So I want to ask you, Marco, what do we mean by debanking? You did a brilliant analysis at Frontier. You can see this commentary, but right off the top, what is debanking, and why does this issue matter to Canadians?
There is a kind of a dictionary definition, if you will. We can start with that says that it is the act of denying bank services to businesses or individuals on the basis of a legal, financial, or reputational risk. There is all kinds of confusions about this because this has been going on for a while, and it pops up here and pops up there. It seems that it's a much wider and deeper problem than it has been reported. But the basic issue is that banks are essentially taking upon themselves to deny services to people on the basis of risk. There's nothing in legislation that allows them to do this unless there are criminal offenses and what have you. So there's two different things here. One is a bank can deny services to somebody who is breaking the law or such things. You know, we saw this, for example, under the umbrella of the Emergencies Act, in which the federal government abused its powers to deny people or force people to have their bank accounts, force banks to deny people services and freeze their bank accounts. That's one aspect of it, but the other aspect of it is not necessarily legal, but a policy issue in which banks claim that there is a reputational risk is the expression, and that can be based for all kinds of political ideas or simply having opinions or a profile on social media that banks find distasteful, and that has become quite a bit of a problem.
Well, there's so many examples, Marco, and I think one of them that you're very familiar with is the story of a lawyer. Can you tell us about, I believe her name is Eva Chipiuk?
Yes. Before Eva, I'd been sort of aware of the problem here and there, and we had heard it from several different people, kind of in isolation. But Eva Chipiuk, who was a lawyer for some members of the truckers' convoy, along with Keith Wilson there in that picture, was essentially served notice by the Royal Bank, headquartered in Montreal, that they were going to deny her services. They gave her a certain amount of time in which she needed to find new services from another institution, and this was based presumably on some kind of reputational risk. There is not a great deal of details out because Eva is contemplating essentially some legal action against the bank. So she's been fairly quiet about it for obvious reasons. And so she sort of propelled the visibility of this issue forward, and that's what prompted me to start looking at it a little bit more carefully. I will give Lee credit. Lee was on this much earlier than I was, and he was looking at the overall trends, not just in Canada, but also in the United States.
So I want to turn to you, Lee, and I do want to make one note, and that is the Emergency Measures Act was ruled as unconstitutional, and that involved a provision to debank people. So, Lee, I want to turn to you. So, what's the scale and scope of debanking, and why does it really matter? Is it just a handful of people, and is it really that serious an issue?
Well, the basis on which it is happening is questionable. And once you have that started, you don't know how far it will go. So how many people this is affecting is only part of the problem here. But during the convoy, we had 200 bank accounts that were frozen worth about $7.8 million. And when they gave to this convoy, it was a legal convoy. I mean, it was legal till suddenly it wasn't legal when we had an Emergencies Act, which is its own problem. But when we look at the Ombudsman for Banking Services and Investments, they opened 94 cases related to debanking in 2024 and 105 in 2023. So basically, the end of the convoy only cut this problem in half. It didn't eliminate it at all. And when I was starting to look into this in recent months, part of it was because Megan Murphy, who's an outspoken traditional feminist who believes that only biological women are women, claimed that in the election when she went to run as a People's Party candidate. She's been living in Mexico, even though she's Canadian, and she wanted to come back and run in the election. And the day she was supposed to come back was the day she was debanked, and found out from her local Vancouver bank, she used to live in Vancouver, that she no longer had access to her funds. And that was enough to intimidate her to not come. Now, I asked for some more evidence of her claims, which she was not prepared to share. I did not include that in my commentary on this. There's another person that I know in Regina, where I live, who had this happen to him. He used to be a candidate for a right-leaning political party, and he had some offenses with guns and with gun possession that was unlicensed, and I think some things having to do with taxes, and found himself debanked from a number of banks. And he is down to just the local credit union that will still have him. But it got me thinking, even murderers have the right to legal defense, because we believe that people are innocent until proven guilty. Maybe we need some kind of financial bill of rights that you cannot just be canceled. This whole concept of reputational risk seems very loose and odd to me, because a bank should not be disclosing who their customers are. And rarely will a customer disclose who they're banking with either. So this reputational risk, how is their reputation harmed? And I think our guest from the credit union can tell us that sometimes when you support a right-wing cause, you'll actually pick up people who want to support you.
Mm-hmm. Very good point, Lee. So are you saying, to be clear, that you can be debanked because of, quote, reputational risks just simply based on some cause or
That is
political
the
opinion
reason that they're
you're
being
involved in?
told. That's the reason they're being told. There's also some things, and I was trying to look into the specifics of this. I know when they're setting up an account, if a bank thinks it will probably be used for proceeds of crime, they may refuse it. I would assume that the same criteria applies for a bank account holder, but we've also had problems with our Canadian banks. TD Bank was busted for having, I think it was something to do with money laundering or drugs, got a very large fine from regulators in the United States where they also operate. So these kind of people that are being debanked are not, even the person I know or Megan Murphy, they're not part of some international criminal enterprise or anything like that. They have certain convictions. The law can deal with those convictions, and the money really has nothing to do with what they're doing.
Remarkable. We've got a lot of comments coming in from the audience. Rutland says, if citizens are worried about debanking and access to money, the best thing is to have multiple accounts at different institutions. So I want to turn to our CEO of a leading credit union, Brett Oland. Warm welcome, Brett. And what the heck is going on here? How do you see this issue? I know that you've got a remarkable story. Are you going along with this debanking trend? What's your response to this?
Yeah, in general, no. The banks do have good reason to shut down people's accounts, and we don't want to sort of let money launderers and drug traffickers and child traffickers sort of get their way with the financial system. So there is legitimate things, ways to shut down bank accounts. But our position was, especially during the trucker convoy, is that it was a peaceful protest, and that basically they used way too much force, in my opinion, to shut down people's accounts. And they definitely had some methodology behind it. First, they had to recognize the truckers as a terrorist organization. And then they had to enact FinTrack, who is basically the anti-money laundering standard within Canada. And then they could basically give direction to the financial institutions to shut down people's accounts. But part of that, as we know, is like shortly after they enacted the Emergencies Act, about a week later, they redacted it. And so part of the problem that we see as a financial institution is we continue to see debanking. It's slowed down a little lately, but ever since the trucker convoy, we typically get one or two people coming in a week holding up a letter and saying, I've been debanked. And you're exactly right. They say something like, you're outside of our risk profile. We no longer want to do business with you. Clear out your accounts and your mortgages and your loans within 30 days, which is pretty astounding. And it really takes out people right at the knees financially. Mm-hmm. And so anybody that sees somebody getting debanked, especially Eva Chipiuk or something like that, they'll basically tuck tail between their legs and say, oh, I don't want to get caught in that. And so it really is a very powerful tool. And I even would go as far as calling it a weaponization of the banking system to browbeat people into the direction that they want.
Well, Brett, I can't imagine being debanked. I mean, if you can't bank, you can't, like, how this kind of ruins your life, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And the comment around having multiple bank accounts is helpful, but part of some of the challenges is they work in tandem a lot of the times. And so some of the banks just relay information and they monitor this type of thing. It's like, oh, you got debanked. Well, we're jumping on that bandwagon. So that's a bit of a challenge. And, especially most people's livelihood is, with their home in Canada, they own their home. But what if you had your mortgage pulled out from underneath you? What if you were in between jobs when that happened? Reapplying to get a new mortgage would be a nightmare. You might not be able to do that. So absolutely. It's a very, very powerful tool that they're using to weaponize, in this case, politically, in my opinion, to get, in their words, just order back in the streets.
Okay, so today we're talking about debanking, and you've heard the words here today, the introduction to debanking, its significance, how it ruins people's lives. And no, this is not about debanking against the bad guys, the terrorists, the money launderers, the drug dealers, and all the rest. No, this is about you. And so therefore, the question is, what are your comments? Have you been debanked? In your experience, do you know someone who has? But as you watch the program, I want you to like the program, share it. This is a very important issue. If you are debanked, you have a serious problem. And it is certainly confronting our society as it undermines our basic rights and freedoms, because without money, how can you participate as a citizen in society? So I do want to share a clip about debanking. The title is Debanking is Real and It's Coming for You. And this is one of these brilliant short videos done by Marco, the team here, and Lee Harding, that summarizes complex policy issues. And so I want to share that clip with you now.
Alberta lawyer Eva Chipiuk is a recent debanking victim. On July 17, the Royal Bank of Canada, RBC, sent her a letter saying she could no longer have an account there. She posted RBC's letter on X. It offered little explanation beyond stating her recent account activity was outside of RBC's client risk appetite. She was told to transfer her funds to another financial institution within 31 days. In an interview with the Financial Post, Chipiuk said she had made two $1,000 transfers to cryptocurrency platform ShakePay Inc. to buy Bitcoin on 2 consecutive days. The second transfer was blocked by the bank and triggered an account freeze. She went to the bank to have her account restored. A few days after succeeding, she received the letter saying her accounts would again be closed until mid-August. While banks often flag cryptocurrency transactions for review because of anti-money laundering regulations, such activity is lawful. If that alone were grounds for debanking, more than 4 million Canadians would be at risk. According to the AAA Global Cryptocurrency Report, about 10.1% of Canadians own cryptocurrency. However, buying crypto does not appear to be the real reason. Chipiuk represented protesters from the Freedom Convoy, which began in opposition to COVID-19 vaccine mandates and sweeping pandemic restrictions. She also cross-examined then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in 2022 at the Public Order Emergency Commission hearings in Ottawa. Her letter from RBC came less than a week before convoy leaders Tamara Lich and Chris Barber were to await sentencing for mischief.
So that's quite a powerful story, and we get more details. We're not sure exactly what the facts are, so we do want to underline that. But Marco, as you look at this case, this phenomenon of debanking, what does it mean for larger society? Why should Canadians care?
Well, there are many reasons. But first, allow me to point out that under the Bank Act, I think it's Section 627 of the Act that outlines the reasons under which banks can deny service to someone, and then it says that it cannot deny. It explicitly says that it cannot deny services on the basis of political ideas or anything like that. And so it is not a matter of law. This is not an application of the act. It's essentially a question of policy. And this has to do with the fundamental nature of what banks have become today. If any one of you looks at, for example, the hiring practices and some of the accommodations and some of the internal policies of banks have become essentially radiating nods of what we would call woke politics. And so there are people inside the banks who embrace this kind of ideology, who look at people with whom they disagree, and then they seem to unleash the bank's authority on people who have ideas that the people who are enforcing DEI policies and such don't like. And so it's done on behalf of the banks, but it seems almost like these kinds of policies have taken over, like they have taken over universities and they have taken over several other different sort of institutions, including, by the way, Alberta's own Alberta Treasury branch. So this is an issue because, first of all, it violates all kinds of rights of individuals. Today, if you're not allowed to essentially have a place to put your money, considering that less and less cash is being used, and so there are barriers, and I use the word deliberately because we are in a social and political time in which everyone is saying that we want to fight all these barriers that essentially strangle our economy and our economic activity. All these tariffs that Trump has put on Canada are evil. and so are the ones that we are putting before ourselves, and we're trying to bring them down. So at the same time as we are fighting barriers and we're trying to liberalize our economy, we are putting and erecting new barriers around individuals and other businesses, shutting them down from banking access and banking altogether. So this is in fact quite against the trend or the tide of liberalizing economic activity. And so this puts at peril individuals and businesses. It has the capacity to essentially ruin your life for a little bit, unless they go to places like Brett's credit union and what have you. It's a serious stress on families and people to be essentially debanked and be given authoritatively X number of days to go and find a new service, new mortgage services, and new banking and so forth. It has become such a problem, and I hope we get to talk about this in a little bit, that the government in the United States, namely the Trump administration, has issued certain orders to banking institutions in the United States, forbidding them essentially from denying services to people on the basis of people's ideas, religion, or what have you. So it has become, in other words, by the actions of the United States administration, namely President Trump, the implication is that banking services are a kind of civil right, and that the denial of it is an infringement of those rights.
Right on. So let's talk more about what we can do here. And there's been a lot of very good comments here. I just want to highlight that video, part of it that we shared, is available on the Frontier website. Make sure you go find that. And I think we put it in the remarks here. But the question then becomes to action. What can we do about this? So I want to play the next part of that video, the clip. I think we're just finding that clip for you. But Marco, you referenced the whole movement in the United States to, frankly, by law, forbid debanking. So I think that's a positive sign. So Lee, what can we do? What can we do to act? And then I'll turn to you, Brett, on the same question.
Sure. I wanted to mention to the viewers that we have a separate YouTube channel from Leaders on the Frontier, and that's where you'll find those commentaries. It's FCPP Canada. And we always put our commentaries on video. Sometimes it's shortly before the written version, and sometimes it's shortly after. So what can we do? In the United States, they had an executive order that explicitly banned the debanking practice for political reasons. But as Marco has said, that is on the books in Canada as well, and it's still happening. I can tell you that when this was happening to convoy people, there were many donors to the convoy, and they said, well, if they're going to start doing that, I'm going to take my money out of the bank. And some of them, it took a while because they don't like tens of thousands of dollars vanishing right away. And that probably contributed to the rescinding of that Emergencies Act order, because you don't need to have a whole lot of people where that's happening, where the banks start to get nervous because they're lending out 10 times whatever their holdings are. And if they run out of that money, it really hinders the business that they can do. So I suppose it seems anecdotally that this is not happening as much in local credit unions, which might be an option for people. But I think part of what we're doing here is part of the answer, is that we are making this issue known, that we oppose this. And we need to have politicians that oppose this. Right after Trump got elected this year, he was talking to the World Economic Forum, and the person there who was wherever it was, Geneva or wherever they were doing their conference, sorry, that'd be Davos. It was Brian T. Moynihan, who was chair of Bank of America. And Trump said to him, you got to stop debanking conservatives. It is wrong. Said it right to his face.
Yes,
and he didn't have a very good response to that. He kind of laughed and made a joke. But we need politicians to speak up and to say that this is wrong, and that it's not a kind of action that's going to be tolerated. When we had banks giving 40-year mortgages in this country, and Jim Flaherty was our federal finance minister, he approached the banks and said, "Don't do this," and they complied with that. So we need some political leadership, and also Marco has some ideas for what Alberta especially can do, given that it has the ATB.
Excellent. So I want to turn to Brett. Those are great suggestions, Lee. What can you do to deal with this problem? What's your take on this, Brett?
Well, yeah, firstly, if you're in Alberta, we'd be happy to help you out as Bow Valley Credit Union, because our big stance is, there's a lot of people that are members of our organization. I don't agree with their opinions, but I don't debank them, and it's similar on the vein, I might not agree with what you say, but I'll fight for your freedom to say that. It's
Good
the
for
same
you.
idea. In ATB in Alberta, they were one of the worst for freezing people's accounts.
Sorry, what is ATB for those?
They were one
viewers
of the
not in
worst
Alberta?
for freezing people's accounts during the truckers' convoy.
The Alberta Treasury Branch.
Constant
Sorry,
letters from them.
ATB, Alberta Treasury Branch, and shame on them. They were part of debanking. Is that right?
Absolutely. I would say they're probably one of the worst for freezing truckers' accounts.
So how is that possible? I thought Alberta was the land of the free here. What's going on? Is it kind of going back?
Unfortunately,
to the
their
point
board and senior management are towing the line for OSFI, the Office of Superintendent of Financial Institutions, and Basel. So a lot of their rules come out of them, and they definitely toe the line for Ottawa.
Sorry.
More than
What are you
Albertans.
referring to? Basel. What is Basel?
Basel, Switzerland is where a lot of the international banking rules come out of, and so they come up with harebrained schemes like central bank digital currencies, digital IDs, that type of thing for banking.
You gotta be kidding.
How to snuff out capital from going into projects they don't agree with, like oil and gas companies, oil and service companies, and unfortunately they're well down that road of towing the line for those international banking standards.
So our conversation then about debanking isn't just simply about a few thousand individuals or how many there are being debanked and ruining their lives. This is the tip of the iceberg. Weaponizing your money, your investments, our pension funds, everything in terms of their kind of ideological agenda, their policy agenda. That's the bigger picture, isn't it, Brett?
I would agree with that statement. Yeah. And it's really what our message is get some of your hard-earned savings outside of the system. So we talked about cash a little bit. We're big proponents of getting to precious metals, gold and Bitcoin, silver, those types of vehicles where, you can't be weaponized when you have it outside of the system. So.
Wow. So I want to ask you a question, and I want to share a little bit of my own story. But Brett, how do you have a conversation with your banker? How do you sit down and say, you know what? I've heard about debanking. I'm really concerned about it. And meanwhile, what is your policy on debanking? In other words, do you have my back? Because I think, isn't that an important conversation and action that every citizen should be doing in this country?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And part of the challenge is you're largely talking to a brick wall, especially in the bigger financial institutions where, there are many, many layers down towards senior management that make these policies and decisions. That's sort of one of the benefits of being part of a credit union. You can actually be just a member and get onto the board and influence policy and procedure and bylaws of the organization. But, and good luck getting on the board of somebody like TD or RBC, where you can actually make an influence on these, behemoth organizations.
Okay, so if you sat down with a banker in a larger institution, Brett, coach us. What question would you need to ask to get an answer?
Well, like I say, it'd be like having a conversation with a brick wall, but you could ask, well, what did you do during the trucker convoy?
Oh.
Did your bank freeze any accounts? Another good question is like, what was your status during COVID? What did you do with your staff around then? What do you continue to do at this branch? Have you frozen anybody's accounts? What were the reasons for? And I think you'd probably get a pretty good sense of whether somebody has your back and whether they're going to just basically use something against you. And, I saw a question pop up on the screen there. Do they monitor social media? And I'm afraid to say they do. So when people apply for a mortgage now, they're doing searches on Facebook, on Twitter.
What? Can you repeat that? Seriously, what? You're applying for a mortgage and they're looking at your social media. You got to be kidding, Brad.
Correct. Yeah. Unfortunately.
Like, everybody hear that? I mean, that is, for me, a bit of a shock. Are you shocked by that, Lee and Marco?
I don't know if anything shocks me, but I think you're rightfully disturbed about it. It shouldn't have anything to do with anything.
Wow.
Everybody's doing that these days, which is another sort of flag about what people say and should say on social media. People should be careful. I'm not saying that we should come to a point in which we should not speak freely, but people should be careful. I belong to a generation which, thank goodness, there was no Facebook when I was in high school. And so because Lord knows, right? And so one has to be careful.
Wow. Okay, so this is the point, though, that this chips away, this undermines the ability of people, and I mean this sincerely, to speak up. Our freedom of speech is foundational to our society for many reasons. It's our way that we are able to debate. We're able to get to truth. We're able to develop that next widget. We're able to share information and say, wow, I guess you've got a better idea than me. It's a way that you can change your mind. It's a way our society progresses. And I look at this and I think this is really a significant movement to use and weaponize your money against you on so many fronts. So what can we do about it? I know there's been a lot of talk about, getting the provinces to assert their sovereignty, Marco, to fight back and say, we don't want to go along with this federal direction or policy approach to things. Is that not an avenue that we can fight back?
We certainly can. I mean, one of the problems, of course, is that the banks don't really compete with one another. They're an oligopoly. And so they're not really concerned with somebody running off to the next bank because, quite frankly, is a big pain to have to change banks. And so people only do it if there is a significant return on the change. And the reality is, if you are changing from the Royal Bank to the Toronto Dominion or what have you, it's going to be the same. And so there isn't much competition. So the competition comes in with credit unions and similar institutions at the provincial level. Now, there are some credit unions that are federally regulated because they operate across provincial boundaries. But I'm talking about the local ones in the provinces, which then, if people start switching their monies to smaller organizations like that, then we get into a more interesting competition. I had suggested in one of the op-eds that I wrote that the Alberta government and maybe Saskatchewan too should take the lead, and there is a reason for this, because they are debanking people on the basis of their ideas, and namely often opposition to either what the government in Ottawa is doing or in opposition to the sort of cancel culture and woke culture, is that there is a greater risk for Albertans, for people in Alberta and people in Saskatchewan, to be debanked from these federally run organizations, because all things being equal, the people in Alberta and the people in Saskatchewan are more likely to oppose federal policies. They have different voting patterns. And so it's just statistically speaking, a kind of a truth. And so Alberta, for example, is in a unique position because it owns a financial organization, which is called the Alberta Treasury Branch, which is woke as the Royal Bank and all the other ones. And so Alberta could move to essentially de-wokeify ATB and begin to make sure that no citizen in Alberta nor resident in Alberta would be debanked on the basis of their idea. So they could rewrite ATB rules and ATB policies or force them to. The other one, of course, you spoke about sovereignty, is the use of the Sovereignty Act. The Sovereignty Act, which is, there is one in Alberta and there is also one in Saskatchewan. And the impetus of these statutes is that the provinces will step in essentially and shield citizens from the violation of the rights at the hands of federal institutions or the federal government. And so Alberta and Saskatchewan are uniquely positioned in order to circumvent some of the nonsense that is going on with the federally chartered banks and reinforce perhaps and shield the credit unions in their jurisdictions to do that. They could also create an Alberta Financial Authority to make sure that that authority is the one that regulates the local credit unions and nothing to do with the system in Ottawa. And finally, perhaps, is enact an Alberta Financial Rights Act to make sure that Albertans are protected. And maybe even, I found out since I started writing about this, that there are talks among some of the constellation of credit unions in the different provinces in the prairies, in Manitoba, in Alberta, and Saskatchewan, to essentially create parallel organizations regarding payments and exchanges that could bypass the federal institutions in order to reinforce that autonomy and that provincial sovereignty.
Very good. So, Marco, that's very helpful. There are solutions here, and it begs the issue: where do the provincial leadership, where do these elected officials stand on these important issues? And Lee, the last time I checked, I've always heard the phrase "money talks." So, isn't that the point? We've got to look at critically where our money is and shift it. And so, what else can citizens do when it comes to, well, creating a kind of Marco alluded to, kind of a parallel economy? Like, we've all heard about the boycotts of Budweiser Light. We've all heard about all kinds of concerns and pushback against Walt Disney. There's been numerous cases where people have just left these companies by the millions, and they have paid a major price. Why is this not happening now with the banks? Is it because it's just not known?
Well, people are going to make decisions on where to put their money based on a whole number of factors. And a lot of it just comes down to whatever rate they're going to get on lending or what have you. I think people do need to think about their convictions and what banks are supporting, and if they like the causes that their bank is supporting. And if they don't, they can tell their bank. So that's one thing that you can do. I think another thing that's tangential to this, but not unimportant, is Bill C2, which is going to cut off people's ability to spend more than $10,000 cash on anything.
Yes.
And so let's say a person gets debanked and they said, fine, you just give me my currency. I'll take that. Well, you can't entirely do that, because if you're paid by a check, you need somewhere to cash it and you need to have an account at that place. So that there's still a problem there. But this legislation to restrict the use of cash, you cannot have, even if it's a series of transactions for the same thing. Let's say you had a home contractor and the bill was more than $10,000. That's now an illegal set of transactions if this bill passes. So something that people can do is vigorously defend the use of cash, because that keeps it out of the digital control and tracking system of everything you do, and also takes a bit of the fangs out of this debanking phenomenon. Is that if you still have the use of cash, it is helpful. But again, everything we've said so far, turning to credit unions, applying political pressure, making sure that debanking is an issue that you were vocal about, getting on the board of your credit union, making your opinion on debanking known to your bank. And if you do decide to debank yourself, to go to a credit union, let your bank know on the way out why you are doing it. It's interesting to see that in the United States, this was one thing that Elizabeth Warren, whom Donald Trump loves to call Pocahontas, actually agreed with him. She said debanking is a real issue, and they held hearings on it in the United States. And the same problem, however, remains with credit card companies and PayPal and whatever. They are still allowed to refuse transactions at their discretion. So even what has been done in the United States needs a bigger scope than what they have done, but it's still more than what we have done.
Right on. Mike McKenzie says people, the comment just went up. People are stupid for not seeking truth. It has nothing about being smart. It is ignorance. Well, I think there's a lot of truth to that, Mike. And I think part of the frustration is we have a legacy media in this country, 2,000 of which are funded by the government. They don't talk about debanking very much that I've seen. So, Brett, what are you seeing from your point of view? I mean, you're on this program. You've written extensively about debanking. You've been one of those articulate voices out there in the industry saying this is wrong. Why is that? Why do you care? Why are you the exception?
Well, for largely, I'm probably one of the loudest voices in the financial services industries in Canada. That's for certain. And I think the way I look at it is, I see what's happened in history, and I'm a bit of a history buff in that aspect. And they've done this before throughout history, and not just past hundreds of years ago history, recent history. They do this in countries, and as recently as last week, I think Vietnam suggested nobody's going to be banked unless they have biometric IDs on them. So you won't even get a bank account unless you have biometrics around it.
Wow.
And so there's things like that are happening that we need to absolutely push back against, because I can look out 20 years from now and see the dystopian nightmare that people are going to be living in if we don't push back against something like this. And probably in my mind, one of the biggest threats that I see is FinTrack. And so they're a national organization, and it came in under the rouge of the Twin Towers going down, as we needed to protect people against terrorists. But lo and behold, 25 years later, they're using it against the people of Canada to basically debank them. My idea around that, just to further on some of the ideas that have come out, is each province needs their own anti-money laws, especially Alberta, where basically the courts would look at it at a provincial level and say, is this warranted to freeze people's accounts? Yes or no? And at least it's that speed bump to stop that blanket dismissal of people in a peaceful protest.
So is that one of the reasons why Bitcoin is popular? I see a comment here, aim high. Buy Bitcoin and put it in self-custody, and none of this will affect you at all. Is that true?
Yeah, so we're big advocates for gold, silver, and Bitcoin, and we actually have accounts that make it very easy to move back and forth from Bitcoin, gold, silver, actual Bitcoin, actual gold, actual silver, physical, for people to not only protect themselves against sort of this debanking phenomenon, but also to protect against what I see as a massive amount of inflation that's going to be coming our way over the next decade.
Wow. Well, this conversation has been a real eye-opener. I encourage people to like this conversation. It's unusual. Usually we have lots of likes, but we don't have a single like. I don't understand that, given the quality of the comments and the enthusiasm and concern here. But please like the program. But it's interesting. TD Bank was recently fined $3 billion by the U.S. for illegal activity. Why are they still allowed to be a national bank? Well, I'm not sure if I can address that question, but I mean, it's so ironic that in Canada we have had a lot of scrutiny, given that incident of that fine, of being a kind of a safe haven for the bad guys, for cartel activity, money laundering, and all the rest. And meanwhile, we have our own government putting the microscope on all kinds of Canadians and debanking them. I just find this so ironic. And I think an earlier question that came up about a half an hour ago was, what did this do to our international reputation? when people were banked. I seem to see a lot of reaction worldwide when our own federal government debank people. That's kind of rare, is it not, in the world, other than perhaps communist China? Marco, do you have any comment on that, or Lee?
Yeah, after I wrote the first couple of columns on this question, I ran into my member of parliament. And I pointed out that this has become an issue, right? That this is no longer flying under the radar. That what the Americans are doing kind of puts it on the big scope, and that the federal government should do something. And his reply was, well, banks have the right to do what they do, because what if you show up and you open a bank account and then they find out that you are the spokesperson or the CEO or the leader of the or some racist organization. I think he said something about neo-Nazis or something like that. And so what is worrying about that is that we're using the risk of the most extreme of examples in order to justify what is happening. But let's say that individual client of that bank is the treasurer of a racist organization. What does that have to do with the price of pig knuckles in Vietnam? In other words, if we are going to start putting people's political beliefs under scrutiny, I mean, racism is an awful thing, and people are racist. There's no denying that, and there are racist people in the world. But then, what other tests are we going to apply to people in order to give them the right to have a bank account? A basic bank account. So that is the worry. In other words, we're not thinking about this correctly at all. The fact is that whatever people think publicly or privately is none of a bank's business. We should be doubly worried because the federal parliament is pounding its chest because it is about to pass an anti-hate legislation. And so if you are somehow convicted, and you could be even sent to prison for expressing something that the government does not approve, then that may also increase your reputational risk, and so increases the profile of the reasons why people should be debanked. So in other words, we're creating essentially other legislation and other situations in which this will have greater ripples to justify taking away one's banking access.
Right on. Well, this has been an incredible conversation. I noticed a comment from Faye, who said that Bow Valley is a great credit union. So, Brett, way to go. And do you have any closing comments on what advice you have for every Canadian as they look at this issue and what they should do?
Well, and I think my final comment was just awareness is great, and keeping it in the forefront. And just because you may not have been involved with the trucker convoy or disagree with ostriches or something like that, doesn't mean that there isn't an issue in the next 10 years that may really tip somebody off and basically furthering that point of, like, maybe you're not in the crosshairs today, but maybe you will be tomorrow.
Exactly.
And this is a tool of weaponization that is very powerful, and it's too powerful for governments, I would feel.
And finally, Lee, should citizens speak up, and how do they do that?
Oh, absolutely. Through all the ways that they have available. Speaking to politicians, talking to your bank, talking to your credit union, talking about it on social media.
Right on. And Marco, where can they find your commentary on this topic?
Both Lee and I have a couple of pieces. I think between the two of us, we have 3 or 4 pieces on the subject on the website of the Frontier Center for Public Policy, and that is fcpp.org.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you, gentlemen, for joining our conversation today about the important topic of debanking, and thank you all for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
was good.
In the meantime, I want to thank our audience for all your comments. It's been quite a discussion, and I hope you found it very helpful. So please share it near and far, from coast to coast in this country. This issue matters because your freedoms and rights matter. We believe that it's important to enable and empower Canadians to live their lives as they see it, and not to be controlled by a government that frankly does not have your interests in mind. So it's very important that we see clearly on this issue. So thank you for joining our conversation today. And we'll see you next week, same time and same place.
Thank you for watching Leaders on the Frontier. We're a nonpartisan think tank. We explore ideas, policy, and practical solutions that can make a difference in the lives of Canadians. We do not accept any government funding. We work for you. Thank you for supporting Frontier. Visit fcpp.org to give. While you're there, be sure to check out our latest articles and research. Without open discussion and debate, you're not thinking, nor are you free. Comment below. We'd love for you to join the conversation.